and pioneers building products, driving growth, and accelerating their careers. We're kicking off with Stella Garber, a 5-time serial entrepreneur and marketing guru known for her pivotal role in scaling Trello pre and post its acquisition by Atlassian. She's now reshaping the future of flexible collaboration at work with her newest startup, Hoop. Stella, could you introduce yourself in your own words and share a little bit about your background and experience at Trello?
Absolutely. So, hey everybody, I'm Stella. Like Denzel said, I'm currently co-founder and CEO at Hoop. And I have just always loved technology and innovation and entrepreneurship my whole career. I graduated from college and jumped right into being an early employee at a startup. Did that, started my own companies, some successful, some not as successful, and worked a little bit in investing, venture capital, and then sort of developed a passion for marketing and helping startups with storytelling and growth. And so that's where I landed as the first marketing hire at Trello, which was an app that I was obsessed with. I was using it to run my own startup and plan my wedding. So it was a very kind of meta moment when I got to join the team and shape the marketing strategy. And so I joined in 2014, and then we had that crazy hockey stick growth. It was a really wild ride. Company changed every 6 months. And then in 2017, we were acquired by Atlassian, and I got to experience that, which was just a really amazing opportunity. Grew the team as part of Atlassian, and then I left in 2020 to start my next venture. So along the way, I've also done a fair bit of angel investing and advising to startups. So that's me.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to dive deeper in a lot of those areas, but I kind of want to start with the 0 to 1 phase because I'm in that phase, you're in that phase now. I really want to know what was the hardest part about Trello's go-to-market and marketing strategy in the early days, and how has that changed, do you think, in today's market?
Yeah, well, Trello, when Trello first launched in 2011 as a product at TechCrunch Disrupt, and Joel Spolsky, who is one of the founders, he had kind of a big following of software developers from his blog from like the early aughts, I guess. And so it sort of took off, I guess, even though I don't even know, were there influencers in that time? I think that was pre-influencer era, but he was definitely an influencer. So I think Trello sort of took off organically after that, and after Joel sort of shared with his networks and on his blogs. And so it was doing a fair bit of organic growth when I joined. And as a marketer, it was really interesting. When I was interviewing at Trello, the CEO, Michael, he was like, "Can you please put together a marketing plan as part of your interview?" And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I thought I was super clever. I made a Trello board. It was all about stats, getting to revenue, sort of traditional funnel metrics. And then he looked at it and he was like, "Cool, this is fine. Like, throw it away, start over. All we care about is growth." I was like, "Oh, okay. Could have told me that." But so it was very, our number one goal in the early days was to grow as fast as possible. And we didn't really care too much about monetization in the early days. All we really cared about was building that moat with users. And it was a very different time. They're very, very different than today. I mean, there weren't a ton. There were a handful of project management apps, but definitely not like the hundreds, thousands that you have today. Mobile was just becoming a thing. Having a mobile app and having a mobile app that was like parity with web was a very sort of novel thing at that time. And Trello really invested heavily in mobile because we understood that to be successful doing what we were doing, which was helping people organize their work and their lives, you needed to be everywhere that people were trying to do that. So I think, yeah, it was a very different time. The thing that I would say is like I came into it without a playbook. I had thrown away my sort of traditional SaaS playbook, and I thought, all right, if our number one objective is growth, what is the role of marketing? And I think people don't even really know what marketing is. They still think it's like buying ads and doing billboards, and that's certainly a tactic, but ultimately, like it comes down to some important metric or what's really the KPI that the company needs at that point. And so I sat down and I thought, okay, well, if our primary objective is growth, what sort of parts of marketing are going to help the most? And I understood, or I sort of um, explained that it would be the product marketing. Basically, if the product is organically growing, the job of marketing is to support that growth and to help users understand more deeply how they can use Trello, different aspects of the product, how it becomes more useful when it's shared, sort of helping with that virality. And so, and we can get more into that if that's interesting. But I think having that first principle of like, what's the goal, and then what's the strategy, and then what are the tactics, that's a very important way to think about the 0 to 1 phase, which is really, really, really difficult. And I want to say that it gets easier with experience, but I just don't think that it does, because every few years, things change. Things change. Some things don't change. Like for example, storytelling being really important. That doesn't change. But like the technology and the channels and people's expectations, attention spans, those things all change.
Definitely. I think it's so exciting that you were at Trello at such a crucial time period for the company. And I also think Trello is such a great example of a product that is between professional and personal use cases for its user. And I'm wondering, like, how did you balance that when you were thinking about Trello's marketing strategy, especially because it was so focused on product-led growth?
Yeah. Well, we sort of invented product-led growth. There were a handful of startups at the time, like us and Slack. And, it was interesting because, again, we weren't following a playbook. It was like what I just explained to you about sitting down and thinking about the role of marketing. Today, you would define that as product-led growth. In those days, it was like, what is the most logical way to grow as quickly as possible? Also, we never did paid acquisition. When we were acquired by Atlassian, they tried to do a bit of paid acquisition, or they had a big acquisition team, and like, they sort of plugged us into their formula. And I was like, guys, I was like, hey, this doesn't work for Trello. We're like different. Organic growth, it makes zero sense to pay. There's some like defensive things that you can do, where you're bidding on your own branded paid search, which makes sense. But like anything else is just wasting money, and it took them like 3 years to figure that out. Um, anyways,
Is there
got
anything
me
you
on a
would
tangent.
do? Is there anything you would do differently now that you're looking back on it with hindsight?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think all the things that we did, focusing on being the easiest app to use, focusing on making it fun and delightful. There were a lot of tactile things in Trello that were very novel at the time. We also, very early, we launched internationally, and Trello was localized in like 17 languages, which was very novel for the time. So it was really all about expanding our footprint. And we had this strategy of like, if we can get to 100 million users and monetize 1% of them, like that's the business that in the early days, that was sort of the mantra that everybody carried around with them. And so it was a little bit of that growth first, revenue later. And the personal use case really, it sort of it amplified that idea of growth, because we had all of these stories where people would use Trello, let's say, with their book club. And then the other insight that we had, that I'm still really keen on, at the time, you would have like the consumer use cases, and then you would have your B2B use cases. And I was like, it's the same human. It's the same human. They're thinking the same things. So if we can treat these humans as whole people versus trying to segment their brain, like that's going to serve us in the long term. And so, talking about meal planning, using Trello boards for meal planning or wedding planning was a huge use case for Trello. Those sorts of things really helped with the organic growth because, again, like we had a user who used Trello at work. They like worked at Apple as a PM, and they were like, oh, you know what, I'm on the PTA, and we started to use Trello, and guess who all these other parents on the PTA were? They were all tech executives, and they brought Trello into their companies. So it was all a big it was all this real push for growth. And in fact, for a really long time, the sample Trello board on our homepage was this kitchen redesign board.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and also what was interesting too is like Trello brought this idea of Kanban to the masses. That was the real sort of first thing that we were known for. And Joel, one of the founders, his whole audience was like engineers. And so he really wanted it to not be that audience. So that's why we went to this like extreme of like, we definitely don't want to be targeting engineers because they already know Kanban.
Yeah.
We want to target everybody else who doesn't. So we really embraced it for a long time. And then, then things changed.
I love that because I feel like I get feedback a lot to use cases that aren't personal, to use the professional use cases because there is so much focus on revenue in today's ecosystem instead of growth.
Yeah.
And there's also a huge focus on paid acquisition. And so now that you're at Hoop, how do you think the drivers of organic growth have changed? And how does this like changing mindset of revenue over everything affect you today as a founder?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It was funny because I was in San Francisco maybe like 18 months ago, and saw the billboards, and it was like Notion, and Notion was following Trello's playbook a little bit, like 5 years later, and they had something that was like all your life's work in one place, and I was like, that sounds familiar. And then I was in San Francisco again, like a few months later, and it was like, use Notion at work or something, and I was like, okay, you can sort of tell when the winds have shifted in terms of what's important to the company. I think it's paid acquisition is really difficult right now to figure out. Twitter as it stands as a go-to-market channel is completely dead. Facebook is very expensive, or Meta is very expensive. And there's a big change, I think, also, it's like all changed. Production is changing. There's new AI tools every week that make it so much cheaper to create custom videos and test, create hundreds of AI driven variations of ad copy. And so it's a really exciting time because people that would hire agencies and spend like six figures on this sort of really elaborate paid strategy, now like regular people can do it, or founders can do it if you have just a little bit of time and energy to devote to that. The problem is that there's just going to be a huge volume of it because all this garbage in, sort of garbage out, like there's just going to be a lot, and so it's going to become even more expensive. I think people have changed. Also sort of depends on who you're targeting, but for example, outbound sales is an example. Everybody is following the same playbook of creating these sequences of emails, and after you get 30 of these every single day, like the value of it reduces over time as a channel. And so I think marketers are looking for novel ways to appeal in an increasingly crowded market. Video has become such an important channel as well. People's attention spans are much shorter, so it's like there's so many people that are trying to figure out go to market. I mean, I don't even know. I feel like the marketing, I have my community of founders and I have my community of marketers, and like nobody really knows what's going on. No, because there's this like sort of transitional moment where this stuff from the past is still kind of working, but you can see the winds of change coming and it's going to be very different. There's, like I mentioned, all these new AI tools. And so the companies that embrace innovation and trying things out and being different, there's a whole lot of the same going on right now. And so everyone's just trying to figure it out, man.
Well, I think you're well positioned to writing the new playbook for our current times because you already have experience writing new playbooks when it came to product led growth. So I think you're well positioned to do it. I'm excited to hear more about your experiences now as a founder at Hoop. But before we dive in, for everyone new to
Mhm.
Hoop, how would you explain Hoop to a 5-year-old and why did you start it?
Yeah. Well, we started Hoop. So Trello was a remotely distributed company like 10 years ago when I joined. So it was very, uh, before the pandemic, I was traveling around and talking about how at conferences, how remote work and distributed work was the future. And everyone was like, oh, she's crazy. And then the pandemic happened. And now, we're all working remote or hybrid or whatever you call it. But I feel like maybe the theme here is that it comes down to first principles, both in marketing and both in work. I've worked remotely for most of my career because I've worked in technology, and it just never made any sense for people to be co-located if you're just working on a computer all day. Like you're just sitting distracting other people, and what's the point? And so Trello was remotely distributed, and we had this really vibrant, fun, really wonderful culture. And so when it came time for me to figure out what I was doing next, I had a lot of like nostalgia about the early days of Trello. And luckily for me, two of my former teammates on the executive team were feeling a similar sort of desire to come together and start something new. And so our goal with when we were starting Hoop was to help teams help individuals and teams work better in this new distributed digital work reality. Because at Trello, we had figured out a lot of things early on, and we're writing about it as part of our marketing strategy. And so we also saw that the way that people are currently working is kind of broken and unsustainable. The fact that we're constantly being pinged and distracted, there's no, it's really hard to block off time for focus work and like deep focus work that requires no distractions. And so we sort of see asynchronous work and the ability to manage all of the distractions around you as being something that becomes a superpower. And so we're coming up with solutions to help people with that. Right now, we're really thinking about how AI, and I know this is something you're obviously been thinking about for a long time too, but how we can help sort of eliminate the busy work that comes that people just assume that they have to do, like writing down all the tasks that come out of a meeting and managing all of the requests that they're having from all over these different tools. Like, can we provide one place where that becomes aggregated and we can help with prioritization and really carve out that time for deep work that people need to be productive and sane, honestly.
I totally agree. And I know we're both very passionate about this because it is such a superpower to be able to manage your distractions and find time for focused work. And I do believe a lot of that is possible to automate with AI. So I'm curious, like, how are you thinking about AI as you're building out Hoop? How are you building out Hoop and prototyping it right now? And
Mhm.
some of the big challenges you're facing?
Well, we're definitely on this very humbling, pre-product market fit journey. We're on the sort of fourth iteration of our product right now, and we're learning a lot. And it's a small team of 6 people. We're all remotely distributed. We work a 4-day work week and mostly asynchronous. So we're really trying to live in this future that we think this is where work is going to go. And I think initially when we started Hoop, it was pre-Chat GPT. And as soon as Chat GPT launched, I'm sure like many other startups, we were like, holy shit, the game has changed.
Really did change.
Oh my goodness. So we were like, we started to, and I should say we didn't like jump on the bandwagon quickly, but it was very clear the more we were seeing, the more we started to experiment with AI in the product that we were building, we were like, this clearly has to be a core because just like mobile, like I was talking about earlier, how Trello was early to mobile, and then now you can't not have a great mobile app that's just table stakes. I think that's how it is going to be in the future. There's no like AI tools. It's just everything is going to be AI. And so I think that the way that we're thinking about it is more like, people just assume that people just take sort of say take for granted, but there's all this work about work that people do. And I really think that AI is going to, and good AI tooling and really understanding how people work and how AI can complement that. That's the real opportunity
I
for a
totally
lot of companies.
I think AI is just going to be the foundation of every company moving forward. I also want to say I really love that you guys are living what you believe with the 4-day work week. And do you guys have a like single purpose statement or a thing that like you've rallied the team around?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we rally the team around. We have this idea of the virtuous cycle that we talk a lot about internally, which is like if you are happy and productive, and when I say productive, I mean like you're getting stuff done, you're creative, you're like flowing at work, things are going well, that carries over into your personal life, whether it's with kids or hobbies or whatever it is. And and in the same way, in your personal life, if you're getting sleep, if you have exercise, if you feel good, if you have time to invest in your relationships and your health, that's going to carry over into your work. You're going to be more creative. And so it's this like virtuous cycle. And I think it's a little bit of the antithesis of hustle culture, which is like go, go, go all the time, all the time. And then, startups, they take a long time.
Yeah.
You read the overnight success stories, and then they leave out like the first 5 years of that overnight success story. And so I think especially being a founder that's been a founder a few times now, and especially being someone who I'm like, oh god, my birthday's in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be 37. And so
Happy
it's like
birthday.
oh, I'm 36 still, Denzel, okay. um don't age me. So I just think that you bring a different perspective to it. And I think we want to help people, we are very mission driven about helping people work in a way that supports a better style of life. And, we're too much at the mercy of these notifications and hurry, 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 slack this, slack that. Your brain feels broken, people are burnt out, it's unsustainable. And so we're trying to be very first principles, thinking about how we can get to the root of those things and help people be more creative and focus more in their lives.
I love that so much. I think it's so true that the virtuous cycle is something we have to be focusing on right now. And it's so timely with the hustle culture. And I think Gen Z is exhausted with the hustle culture. They're ready to find a better way to live and work. And I think it's so great that you're at the forefront of that. As a serial founder, kind of changing paths a little bit, what makes this particular part of the early stage startup journey, the pre-product market fit part, particularly hard? What is so difficult about this stage versus all of the other stages?
I think it's a little bit the uncertainty, because you hear all of those statistics about startups that fail, and I definitely had, I've been part of startups that have failed, and it sucks. So I think that no matter how experienced the founders are, no matter how much money you've raised, it's still not a sure thing. And um, even after product market fit, it's not a sure thing, but at least you have some validation, or you have more optionality around what you can do with the business. So I think that's it. At the same time, though, like entrepreneurs, we're kind of crazy people, right? Because every day we're just showing up and it's failure most of the time. And then there's like one teeny bit of success, and you have to hang on to that because it's just like the roller
Celebrate
coaster.
wins.
Exactly. So So, and to do this more than once, I'm like such an optimist, and I think that being both mission driven, also both mission driven and at Trello we felt the same way. At Trello we had all of these stories of people who like Trello was such an amazing product, like organizing their lives and helping them. We had a in the early days a person who like their partner had suffered a heart attack, and like they used Trello to help bring order to the chaos of like their healthcare. There was like, I mean, to an extreme, like there was a terrorist attack at some point, and people were using a Trello board to help locate victims and, find their loved ones. And it was like, oh my God, it's like the work that we're doing really matters. And I definitely feel that way about Hoop in terms of, also being a parent and understanding how difficult it is to manage everything. Um, all the things like tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I have to be online and book summer camp for my kid.
Yeah.
Like I literally have 3 timers because if I am 10 minutes late, we may not get the camp that we want. And that's hell for me because then I have to work. So anyways, I just think that there's that helping people, being mission driven is something that really drives me. And then just having gone through it and knowing what's on the other side is also really rewarding.
I love that you shared that. I agree that these tools, they might just seem like work tools, but they're impacting how you live your life every day. And that is crucial. Like we want to all be planning our best days every day. I'm
Yes.
curious, what is the cheat code that you wish more founders would internalize?
What is it? That's great. I'm just gonna use recency bias here. And I saw on LinkedIn, I think it was Danny, what's her last name from Jam? Danny Grant? Is that her last name? Anyways, she was saying that uh that co-founders, people think that co-founders are just people who have different skill sets and you're working together. And what she'd realized is that the co-founders are there to like share the journey and to go through the things together. And I really love that reframing because my co-founders and I, we've been working together for freaking 10 years at this point. And every day we choose to show up and work together, and we do have different skill sets, but when something crazy happens like last year when SVB imploded,
Oh my
and
God.
it was like it didn't really matter who was the product person and it was like we were in it together and everything. And I know you're a solo founder, and I don't know how you do it because it's a lot. So anyways, I think that cheat code was really, if I, that was something that really spoke to me about how it's more about having people who will shoulder the journey with you.
I love that. And I completely agree. I wish I had a co-founder 9 times a day. I'm curious, like with this remote work life, how do you guys cultivate and maintain a strong company culture?
Ask that, and I find it such a bizarre question. People have been asking me that since, Trello basically. And the reality is that culture is not about like desks and chairs and,
Proximity.
having a hot lunch. Yeah, culture is about how you show up to work, the words you use, the values that you that are in the company and that you're talking about. It's about the moments when things are really difficult and how leadership responds to those things. And so I think with remote work, I always use this analogy of like, in an office, you don't just show up and expect there to be desks and chairs. Somebody is doing the planning of that infrastructure. So with remote work, you have to be just as structured and thoughtful and communicative, except that instead of chairs and desks, it's like tooling and policy and expectations. People people want to be successful at work, and what they need to be successful is to understand what the expectations of are of them. And so that takes training managers to be very explicit. It takes accountability and a culture of accountability. It takes a culture of communication and for people to understand when and how and where they should be communicating. And so I think the companies that are very intentional about those things have strong remote cultures. And the companies where things are sort of willy-nilly, like, you know, Slack is blowing up in the middle of the night because nobody has communicated what the boundaries and expectations are and people can't step away, like that's not sustainable. So yeah, I think the companies that are probably struggling the most with this are companies that maybe did not start remote, because when you start remote you have to be thoughtful about that from the beginning.
I agree. I think being remote is a forcing mechanism for you to create the culture and policy that you ideally want in a company where everyone can be independent and empowered to bring their best presence to the company.
Yeah,
I'm
one of the really cool things was, I was the first remote executive at Trello. When I joined the team, it was like a maybe 12, 15 people, mostly in New York, and I was in Chicago. And so I helped to sort of craft our remote policies, and that was like a big part because I was like, there was like we would do these weekly town halls, and they would do them in the New York kitchen. And I would be on the Zoom. I was like, no, we can't do this. If we are, and Trello had started out of Fog Creek Software, which was in New York, but then we started hiring remotely, and then it became like 70-30 remote New York. And so I was like, no, if we're doing these town halls, everyone's got to be taking the call from their computer. And that's got to be policy. And so we developed all these policies. Well, one of the cool things was that when Atlassian acquired Trello, they weren't super sure about the whole remote thing. They had a pretty strong office culture. And but they were very curious and open to learning about it. And so when the pandemic hit, Atlassian was actually one of the very first companies to go all in on remote work, and they ended up adopting almost all of Trello's remote work policies. So it was cool to see these policies that we'd like figured out as a small team now being applied at a company with like 10,000 employees globally.
I love that. It gave Atlassian a cutting edge on the remote work front. And I do think there needs to be a playbook. Maybe you guys should write one on like what are these policies to create the perfect 4-day work week, remote work. What is this future work culture look like?
Yeah.
I'm curious, as someone who is an angel investor and advisor in other startups, how has the role of mentorship influenced your journey as a founder, either now at Hoop or over the past decade?
Yeah. Well, I always try to find people who are like living the life that I want or who are a few steps ahead of me. And I try to, ask them questions and develop relationships and try to learn. Over time, what I found is that, you know, whether it's a mentor or a mentee, we end up becoming very close because ultimately things change and people's roles change, and it comes down to the relationship. So I always value the relationships that I develop with people. Um, I think mentors are really important. The older that I've gotten, the more I've realized that I think when you're younger, you think mentors have it all figured out and they just need to share their like secrets with you. And the reality is that like just like being when you're a kid and you think the grown-ups are all
Right.
like, oh, when I'm a grown up, I'm going to do things. It's like grown-ups are all still trying to figure it out too. I feel like with mentors, it's a similar thing where they can share their expertise at this or experience with this company or how to get on a board or what it's like to do this and that. And also their networks being probably the most valuable thing. But you sort of have to figure things out and find the answers yourself.
What are your first principles around asking a mentor for help?
Well, I try to be, I'm from the Midwest, and so we're very humble. We don't try to, it's sort of what you see is what you get culture. So I am very open to asking for help as soon as I need it or as soon as I think that somebody already knows something or I can learn something. I try to reach out and I try to be very human about it and try to make like a human connection. And if you appeal to people on a human level versus trying to be formal or like, um, also I try to get a warm intro through my network so that it does feel more human. I think it just really comes back down to relationships, and um, that's how I've built my network over the last 20 years. Oh God, I'm so old.
I love that. No, with your experience, I'm curious, how does your involvement as an angel investor help you as a startup founder?
It helps me so much. Oh my gosh. I feel like similarly to any like creative field, it's like when you're doing your own thing, it's so hard to see what you're doing wrong. But like everybody else, you're like, oh, well, if they did this one thing or if they did that one thing. So it's very easy to see it in other people. And I find that it helps me have a lot more self-awareness because like I'm too close to my own work. And so being able to be a mentor and to be an advisor and to see what other startups are doing also helps sort of validate what's working for other people, what's not working. I also really love angel investing because I love to learn. And I also, as a founder, you're sort of limited to your successes being with this one company. And when you're an angel investor, you get to see the good and the bad of many companies and be part of that journey as well. And so I think I've really come to value that over the years. The learning and the relationships really great.
That really makes sense to me, being able to like validate or test hypotheses while looking at other people. I'm curious, what does your investor thesis look like today, and how do you get the conviction to actually pull the trigger on an investment?
Yeah, I'm not as active today as I was, because what you learn about angel investing is that you constant and investing in general is like the market is very dynamic. And so when you're investing, you want to have a lot of deal flow, or you want to see a lot of opportunities so you understand what the prices and dynamics of the rounds are. Because I worked briefly in VC when I was in business school, and it was like you would get one pitch about something. And as a founder, the perspective is like you're putting your whole life into this one thing and you have so much conviction in it. But when you're on the investing side, you get the same 10 pitches or the same 20 in one day, especially if it's something that's very buzzy. Um, like, and so you can see the differences, the way that people are approaching the same problem, who the types of founders are, how much capital they've raised, what the terms that they're seeking are. So it's a very like dynamic market driven thing. And so to be an angel investor when you're a founder, I've not super figured that out because I think it just takes a lot of bandwidth to be an angel investor. I will say that once you've established yourself, a lot of times people will come to you for a certain sort of expertise, and you end up relying a lot on your network. Like, oh, if Denzel sends me this company, this deal, like I'm going to talk to them and I know they're going to be good. And that's going to be a huge signal. Um, so right now, I try to, I have invested in a lot of funds because the funds are actively, diligencing companies in ways that I don't have the bandwidth for currently. But I also invest in relationships. So I've invested in a lot of companies that are people that I've worked with previously or studied with previously, people that I've known over a long time period, a long horizon. And what else? And also just I think also things that I have a lot of conviction in. So in the future of work, I've done a lot of investments. I try to put my money where my mouth is. So I've done I think 32 angel investments. Over half of them, maybe even more, are women or people of color because I really believe in supporting in supporting women. And what else? And the future of work. And oh, the reason I mentioned that is like, for example, I have two kids. And when I was going through the whole process, I was like, oh my God, the maternal health system completely broken. And so I was like, I don't want to start a company in this because I don't know anything about healthcare. And so I came across a founder who was referred to me, who was starting like a company that was making doula care more widely available, both digitally and in person. And I met her and her co-founder, and we had we really connected over our traumatic birthing experiences. And I invested in that company. And it was really important to me because I was like, well, I have to, if I believe this is broken, I want to try to fix it. And so, I'm going to put capital into that. And that's a great, it's called Partum Health, and it's a great company. I'm proud to be an angel investor of. And then, yeah, so things that I have a conviction in, future of work for sure. And then also things that I just want to learn in. Sometimes like I'll write a small check just so I can learn.
Yeah, keep your pulse on it. I love that. I love like that your thesis is so tied to your value system. I think that's really important.
Yes.
Last big question. As an angel investor, you've seen the funding climate change, and as a founder, you've also seen it change. How do you think it's different from both of those perspectives?
Oh my God. So it's changed as a founder. It's very difficult right now. I think that's good though, because I think what you were seeing is people getting a lot of capital that would not have raised in today's environment. And, those things are going to flame out. So it's really a question of whether they flamed out um, with capital or without capital. I think that so the bar is much higher now to raise as a founder, which again I think is a good thing because it's super competitive out there. It's hard to build a business, especially a tech business these days. Um, as an angel investor, um, as an angel investor, I'm definitely much more picky. I think I'm getting this year. I saw a lot less deal flow. People doing a lot fewer deals. People, partly because of the reset, partly because the capital markets and private markets of later stage companies were frozen. So there was no exit opportunities, and all those like later stage funds were not deploying capital. And so that makes, I'm an early stage. I'm like a seed, Series A type, pre-seed, seed, Series A type of an investor. And so that gives you pause because if companies can't raise later on, then you can't. And so I think that was reflective of the funds that I'm also invested in. I think it's starting to thaw a little bit now. People are obviously very excited about AI, both, I mean, as a founder and as an angel investor. I've been really excited about the AI opportunities that I've seen just because they're so transformational. There's so much opportunity in the space. The real question is customer acquisition. I'm as an angel investor, I mean, as you know, my whole thing is like adding marketing value. And so I'm super interested and curious in how companies approach customer acquisition these days, especially like the 0 to 1 phase.
I agree. As a founder, I'm very curious how companies are approaching customer acquisition.
Totally. Me too.
I would love to do a lightning round so that all of our
Okay.
viewers can get a good sense of who you are. So, what's your favorite productivity hack?
Productivity hack. Favorite productivity hack. Um, just trying, I try to be, okay. The 4-day work week is the ultimate productivity hack.
Love that.
I saw it that someone said that the Friday is like the gift of the fifth day, the gift of the fifth. And so like for me, I'm very motivated to get everything that I can done so that Friday can be a very creative, free thinking day for me. So that really motivates me to use my time very wisely during the Monday through Thursday.
That's amazing. I love that. I think Slack is taking up a very similar model as well. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Um, any historical figure. I just watched a documentary about Coco Chanel, so I'm going with Coco Chanel. Was very fascinated by her life. Never learned anything about it, but the how innovative she was and how she drew inspiration for her business from her personal life, I thought was really interesting.
That's amazing. And she's self-made, which is such an inspiring journey.
Definitely.
Favorite hot beverage at your desk while you're working?
Oh, coffee. I love coffee. In fact, I'm in Miami right now, and unfortunately, there's not great coffee here. And
No.
so as a Chicagoan, I feel very comfortable saying that because we have amazing coffee. So I get Cometeer, which is like this frozen, really fancy espresso. So I get Cometeer when I'm here, which is very, very bougie of me.
I love that though. Favorite cocktail?
Favorite cocktail, a dirty martini.
Oh, cool. Favorite type of networking event, either as an investor or as a founder?
I love doing one-on-one coffee chats. I hate big networking events. You can never really like I want to connect with people like really deeply. And anytime I meet with someone one-on-one over coffee, that ends up being a relationship that lasts a very, very long time versus the sort of superficial conversations that you have at larger networking events.
I love that. That's a great tip. Favorite restaurant in Chicago for date night and for a like investor meeting
Oh my.
or
Okay,
professional.
so I'm a huge foodie, so I never go to a restaurant more than once unless it's like really fabulous. I think what's my favorite restaurant in Chicago right now? Um for networking, it tends to be an investor dinner. It tends to be in the West Loop where that's sort of the heart of there's this hotel called the Hoxton, and I feel like the lobby is where all the everyone has like coffee or lunch meetings. There's a restaurant called Sierra, so I'll say that. And then for like a date night, okay, my husband, he thinks I don't know, but I know. There's this there's a new beef omakase restaurant that just opened. It's like a 10-seater and it's like a beef, like a A5 Japanese wagyu like omakase. I know that we're doing that for my birthday.
That's amazing. That sounds so fun. Favorite place you've ever visited?
Um, Favorite place I've ever visited. I think I'm just like I love novelty. So I just love going to different places and learning as much as I can.
Awesome. Where are you going next?
Next up, I am going on a Disney cruise with my children, and I'm so excited. It's like fulfilling a childhood fantasy of mine. We did one last year, and that was the first time that I did it. And I came away from that really being blown away by how important the art of storytelling is because like Disney is so good at storytelling and it infuses every part of the user experience of being a guest at any of their parks or on the cruise ship. So I remember walking away from that experience being like storytelling. We really need to think about and focus on storytelling in our startup.
That's awesome. I hope you have so much fun. I agree. Disney does such a great job of embodying storytelling into every capitalistic thing that they do.
Yes, yes.
What is the book that has influenced you the most? At Hoop or recently or anything?
At Hoop, so I go to the library every week with my kids, and I randomly picked up a book called, I think it's called Overcoming Collaboration Overload, randomly at the library. It's like such a nerdy book about productivity, but it really, really changed my perspective on work. And the idea behind this book, it's this organizational researcher who goes in and he finds out that people are just overwhelmed by all of these requests, well, collaboration, requests to collaborate. So, can you give me feedback on this? Can you join this meeting? Can you do this? Turns out that these types of requests for collaboration have increased by 50% in like the last 7 years. And it's taking up more and more of people's time. And then they don't have time to do other stuff. And so this book, other more important stuff, namely their work and things that they need to get ahead. So this book was examining how to deal with the proliferation of collaboration, why people feel guilt if they're not, if you don't attend a meeting, like you feel guilty, you don't feel great about it, why collaboration feels so good, and then how to combat it. And I think that influenced a lot of Hoop
That's a
early
great.
days.
I'm excited to read it. Well, last thing, where can people learn more about you and Hoop?
So, maybe 2 years ago, I would have said Twitter, where I'm startup Stella. It doesn't feel like Twitter's really a thing anymore. So I would say just on LinkedIn, you can find me, Stella Garber.
LinkedIn is the new Facebook for everyone at work, or I guess the
Yes.
TikTok for everyone at work.
And it's like Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok all in one for work.
Thank you so much, Stella, for all the time today and for these great insights. It was so great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Denzel.